When the mind becomes scattered, the energy that should move like a steady stream begins to fragment. Each thought, each distraction, each moment of worry divides that stream into smaller and smaller trickles until there is not enough force to move anything meaningfully. But when attention is unified, when the eyes, the breath, and the mind are focused on one direction, the same energy becomes powerful enough to shape reality. This is the principle that governs both the internal world and the external world. Energy does not simply appear or disappear. It follows the line of attention like water following the riverbed. Many people underestimate how powerful their attention truly is. Every time you direct your focus towards something, you give it life. When you focus on fear, fear grows stronger. When you focus on peace, peace becomes more natural. When you dwell on the negative traits of others, resentment takes root. When you choose to observe your own behavior and cultivate awareness, clarity begins to blossom. The mind is not a passive observer. It is the creator of experience. Attention is the brush, and your consciousness is the canvas upon which the picture of your life is painted. In the ancient training halls, every movement begins with awareness. The master does not swing the sword blindly. He feels the movement before it happens, senses the alignment of his body, breath, and mind, and channels his entire being into one singular purpose. This is not just a physical exercise, it is a lesson in energy. To act without attention is to waste energy. To move with awareness is to turn every gesture into power. In everyday life, the same principle applies. The modern world constantly competes for your attention. Notifications, screens, and endless streams of information keep pulling your awareness outward, fragmenting it into pieces. You begin to live in reaction, not in creation. You wake up tired not because your body lacks rest, but because your mind has been constantly scattered. The discipline, therefore, is to reclaim your attention, to bring it home to the present moment. When you do this, energy returns to you. Your focus becomes sharper, your breathing steadier, your emotions quieter. You begin to feel the silent current of strength that was always within you, but hidden beneath layers of distraction. To understand where your energy goes, you must first observe where your attention rests. Notice how easily the mind drifts toward worry, toward judgment, toward comparison. Each time it does, it leaks energy. It's like carrying a cup full of water, but letting it spill with every step. By the time you reach your destination, there is nothing left to drink. Awareness is the act of holding the cup steadily, ensuring nothing is lost. This is why ancient masters often say, guard your attention as you would guard your life. Because in truth, your life is the sum of what you give your energy to. Focusing on yourself is not an act of selfishness, it is an act of responsibility. When your attention is constantly given to what others think, what others do, or how others live, your energy becomes scattered across countless directions that do not belong to you. The power to create, to grow, to evolve begins to weaken. But when you withdraw your attention from the external and turn it inward, something profound happens. You start to gather strength. You become centered, aware of your thoughts, emotions, and intentions. The inner dialogue that once controlled you begins to slow down, and a deeper stillness emerges. From this stillness, true action arises. Every thought is a seed. The more attention you give to a thought, the deeper its roots grow. When you constantly nourish negative thoughts, you create a garden of limitations. When you nurture thoughts of gratitude, peace, and self-discipline, you create a landscape of abundance. The universe mirrors your focus. It does not respond to what you merely wish for. It responds to what you continuously feed with your energy. If you focus on your weaknesses, they grow. If you focus on your strengths, they expand. Energy flows where attention goes, but attention follows intention. Therefore, before you act, before you speak, before you decide, ask yourself, where do I wish my energy to go? Because every moment of attention is an investment. You are either building yourself or draining yourself. You are either directing your life consciously or allowing it to drift unconsciously. Mastery begins with the understanding that nothing in life is neutral. Everything you focus on becomes more powerful through the energy you give it. In meditation, this truth becomes clear. When you focus on your breath, the breath deepens. When you focus on your heartbeat, the rhythm steadies. When you focus on silence, the noise of the mind fades. The practice is simple but not easy because the mind resists stillness. It prefers movement, stimulation, and distraction. Yet, through patience and discipline, attention can be trained. Over time, the scattered rays of the mind begin to align like sunlight passing through a lens. When focused, that same light can ignite fire. The fire of awareness transforms confusion into understanding, weakness into strength, and reaction into wisdom. To master your attention is to master your energy, and to master your energy is to master your life. You cannot control the world, but you can control where your awareness goes within it. Each day is an opportunity to practice. When anger arises, observe it instead of feeding it. When doubt appears, breathe through it instead of clinging to it. When beauty crosses your path, allow yourself to fully experience it instead of rushing past. This is how attention turns ordinary moments into sacred ones. As your awareness deepens, you begin to sense how everything is energy in motion. Every emotion, every thought, every action. The direction of your attention determines whether that energy moves upward toward expansion or downward toward depletion. The wise do not waste energy on what they cannot control. They channel it into what can be transformed: their own mind, their own reactions, their own state of being. When this understanding becomes lived truth, life no longer feels like something that happens to you. It becomes something that flows through you, guided by your focused awareness and calm intention. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, it is the presence of awareness. When the noise of the world fades, when the voices of distraction and expectation grow quiet, what remains is not emptiness but depth. In silence, we begin to hear what has always been there, the gentle whispers of our own truth. It is in silence that we meet ourselves without filters, without masks, without roles. It is in silence that we recognize what we have been avoiding through endless movement, endless talking, endless searching. The external world teaches us to speak, to perform, to react, but the internal world teaches us to listen, to observe, to understand. The human mind has become conditioned to noise. It thrives on stimulation, on constant input, conversation, and reaction. Yet beneath that surface noise exists a vast stillness that few dare to enter. Silence is uncomfortable for many because it reveals the chaos within. When there is no distraction, the mind's restlessness becomes visible. Old memories surface, emotions arise, and unprocessed thoughts seek attention. But this discomfort is not an enemy. It is the first step towards self-discovery. Through silence, what was hidden becomes illuminated, and what was unconscious becomes conscious. In silence, time slows down. You begin to notice the subtleties of your breath, the weight of your body, the rhythm of your thoughts. You start to see how much of your life has been lived automatically, how often your responses are patterns rather than choices. Silence brings awareness to these patterns, not through judgment but through gentle observation. The more you sit in silence, the more clearly you perceive the nature of your mind. You begin to realize that you are not your thoughts, you are the awareness that observes them. When a pond is disturbed, its surface becomes clouded, and you cannot see your reflection. But when the water becomes still, the reflection becomes clear. The same is true of the human mind. As long as it is agitated by noise, comparison, and desire, you cannot see your true nature. But when it becomes silent, you see yourself as you are, without distortion. This is why silence is a mirror. It does not show you what you pretend to be, it shows you what you truly are. It reflects your fears, your attachments, your longing, your peace. It holds no opinion, no judgment, no bias. It simply reveals. In the modern world, people often fear silence because it feels like isolation. But silence is not loneliness, it is intimacy. It is the deepest connection you can have with yourself, with existence, with the very essence of life. When you sit in silence, you are not separating yourself from the world. You are returning to harmony with it. The trees do not speak, yet they communicate. The wind does not use words, yet it teaches movement. The river does not announce its purpose, yet it fulfills it perfectly. In silence, you begin to understand that the universe itself operates through quiet intelligence, not through noise. Every spiritual practice across time has valued silence as the foundation of wisdom. The sage retreats into the mountains not to escape life, but to hear it more clearly. The monk sits in meditation not to withdraw from the world, but to become more present to it. The silence they seek is not external. It is internal. It is the silence that exists even amidst sound, the stillness that remains unshaken by the movements of life. This inner silence is not achieved through force. It arises through understanding. When you stop trying to control everything, when you stop resisting what is, silence naturally unfolds within you. The practice of silence is a form of listening. Not listening to words, but listening to existence. When you are silent, you can hear the rhythm of your own heartbeat, the subtle hum of life around you, the natural harmony that pervades everything. You begin to notice that silence is not empty, it is full. Full of insight, full of presence, full of wisdom. Every answer you seek already exists in that quiet space, waiting for you to listen deeply enough to receive it. Many people seek clarity from others, but true clarity comes only when you are quiet enough to hear yourself. You do not need to chase understanding, you need to allow it. In silence, truth reveals itself without effort. When you are silent, you see that most confusion in life arises from too much talking and too little listening. Every word you speak is energy that leaves you. Every moment of silence is energy that returns to you. The wise conserve their energy not by avoiding people, but by mastering when to speak and when to remain still. Silence is not passive, it is active awareness. It requires presence, patience, and attention. It is not the same as suppression. Suppression hides emotions, but silence reveals them. In silence, anger loses its fire, sadness softens into understanding, and fear dissolves into trust. This is the transformative power of silence. It does not fight darkness, it absorbs it. It does not resist pain, it understands it. Through silence, pain becomes wisdom and chaos becomes balance. When you learn to dwell in silence, your perception of life changes. You begin to move slower but with more purpose. You begin to speak less but with more truth. You begin to act not from reaction but from awareness. You start to realize that silence is not something to visit occasionally, it is your natural state. Beneath every thought, every emotion, every identity, silence is there, calm, vast, infinite. It is the background upon which all of life plays out. The journey of self-discovery is not a journey of adding more, but of removing what is unnecessary. Noise is unnecessary. Hurry is unnecessary. Pretending is unnecessary. Silence strips away these layers until what remains is authenticity. You begin to live not as the person others expect you to be, but as the person you truly are. Silence does not give you something new, it reveals what was always there. It is the mirror that reflects the self beyond name, beyond story, beyond time. In silence, you come face to face with your own being. You see the parts of yourself you have ignored, the emotions you have buried, the dreams you have forgotten. You see how much of your life has been shaped by others' opinions and how little by your own truth. But instead of judging, you begin to understand. And in that understanding, you begin to change. The more you embrace silence, the more you realize that the world outside can only mirror the peace or turmoil that exists within you. Silence shows you this connection. It teaches you that before you can understand others, you must first understand yourself. Before you can listen to the world, you must first listen to the silence within. Comparison is one of the most subtle thieves of human energy. It disguises itself as motivation, yet it quietly drains peace, gratitude, and purpose from the mind. When you compare yourself to others, you lose sight of your own rhythm. You begin to measure your journey by standards that were never meant for you. What once felt clear becomes confused. What once felt fulfilling becomes incomplete. The seed of comparison grows in the soil of insecurity, and once it takes root, it distorts perception. Instead of seeing your path as sacred and unique, you begin to chase shadows that were never meant to guide you. In every person exists a unique alignment, a combination of mind, body, and spirit that resonates with a particular frequency. This alignment is the foundation of purpose. When you live in harmony with your own rhythm, everything you do feels natural. Your actions flow with ease, your intentions remain clear, and your energy moves without resistance. But when you begin to compare, this alignment fractures. You start to move in ways that do not belong to you. You begin to mimic the steps of others, and in doing so, you step out of your own truth. The habit of comparison is rooted in misunderstanding. The mind believes that worth is measured by achievement, by recognition, by how one's life appears in the eyes of others. But true worth cannot be compared because it is not built from the external. It is born from the internal. No two leaves are identical, just as no two leaves on a tree share the same pattern. The sun does not compete with the moon, and yet both illuminate the world in their own time. In the same way, your timing, your growth, your expression will always unfold according to your own nature. To compare is to resist this natural unfolding. When you compare yourself to another, you are not seeing them as they truly are. you are seeing only a fragment of their surface. You see their success, but not their struggle. You see their peace, but not their inner storms. Comparison is built on illusion because it judges based on what is visible, not what is true. Every being carries hidden challenges, unseen lessons, and silent victories. To compare yourself with what you do not fully understand is to lose the connection with what you are meant to become. Alignment is not about being better, it is about being balanced. When the body is aligned, energy flows without obstruction. When the mind is aligned, thoughts and actions move in harmony. When the spirit is aligned, life unfolds with clarity. But comparison disrupts this balance. It pulls your energy outward. Instead of being present with your own experience, you begin to live in reaction to others. Your choices become reflections of someone else's path, and your inner voice grows faint. The more you compare, the more disconnected you become from the truth of who you are. The mind often seeks identity through contrast. It wants to know where it stands by measuring against others. But this measurement is false because every person's path begins from a different point and moves toward a different horizon. The flower that blooms in the morning is not more beautiful than the one that opens at night. It simply expresses its nature at its own time. The problem arises when we forget this truth and force ourselves to bloom according to someone else's season. This is how comparison steals alignment. It makes you doubt your timing, your process, your purpose. In the practice of stillness, you can observe how comparison operates. It enters as a quiet thought. I should be further ahead. Siga, they are happier than I am. Ziva, need to be more like them. Each thought pulls a thread from the fabric of your peace. Over time, those threads unravel into frustration and self-doubt. But when you become aware of this mechanism, you can choose not to feed it. You can return your attention inward, back to your own breathing, your own steps, your own moment. Awareness restores alignment because it reminds you that everything you need already exists within you. Comparison distracts you from mastery. The master does not waste time watching others, the master studies himself. He observes his weaknesses, refines his discipline, and strengthens his focus. He knows that excellence is born from consistent inner work, not from competing with others. When your energy is directed toward comparison, it fragments. When directed toward mastery, it multiplies. The same energy that breeds envy can become the force that fuels transformation, if only you redirect it back to yourself. Gratitude is the antidote to comparison. When you begin to appreciate where you are, the need to measure against others fades. Gratitude grounds you in the present moment. It reminds you that what you have is enough for this step of the journey. It allows you to celebrate others without diminishing yourself. When you are aligned, you no longer compete. You contribute. You no longer chase validation, you express truth. Alignment gives you the strength to walk your own path with quiet confidence, without the noise of comparison clouding your vision. In nature, everything exists in harmony because nothing compares itself. The river does not wish to be the mountain. The mountain does not envy the sea. Each fulfills its purpose perfectly because it remains true to its nature. When human beings forget this principle, suffering begins. The mind creates divisions, success and failure, greater and lesser, worthy and unworthy. These are illusions born from separation. In reality, there is only one movement of life expressing itself in countless forms. To compare one expression to another is to misunderstand the unity that connects them. When you realign with yourself, you begin to sense the quiet joy of being exactly where you are. You no longer rush to catch up with anyone. You no longer feel behind. You understand that life unfolds like breath, inhale and exhale, expansion and release. Each moment has its purpose, and each phase of your journey carries a lesson. Comparison blinds you to these lessons because it keeps your gaze fixed elsewhere. But when you turn inward, awareness grows, and with it comes peace. The thief of comparison can only exist in a mind that has forgotten its own rhythm. When you remember who you are, when you return to your center, alignment becomes natural again. Every step feels lighter, every action carries intention, and every moment becomes enough. You no longer seek to be more than others, you seek to be more of yourself. And in that simple return to your own alignment, life begins to flow once more with quiet strength and unshakable clarity. Growth is not always loud. It does not always happen in the presence of applause or recognition. True growth often takes place in moments of stillness, in the quiet spaces where there are no witnesses, No comparisons and no expectations. Solitude becomes the ground where transformation silently unfolds. It is in solitude that the mind begins to clear, the heart begins to soften, and the spirit begins to expand. Many fear solitude because it removes the distractions that hide their inner truth. Yet, without solitude, growth remains shallow, dependent on noise, approval, and external validation. Solitude is the sacred space where you meet the parts of yourself that you have forgotten, ignored, or silenced. In solitude, time slows down. The constant rush of doing gives way to the simplicity of being. You start to notice the details that once went unseen, the rhythm of your breathing, the subtle sensations in your body, the rise and fall of your thoughts. When you are alone, the mask you wear for the world begins to fall away. There is no one left to impress, no image left to maintain, no role to play. You face yourself as you are, raw and unfiltered. At first, this confrontation feels uncomfortable. The silence may seem heavy, the stillness unfamiliar. But as you remain in it, something shifts. The mind, once restless, begins to settle. The noise fades, and in that quiet space, awareness begins to blossom. Every tree grows in solitude. Beneath the surface, its roots extend deeper into the earth, drawing nourishment from unseen places. The deeper the roots, the stronger the tree. Human growth follows the same principle. In solitude, you develop roots, patience, discipline, understanding, and resilience. These qualities cannot grow in the chaos of constant stimulation. They require space, reflection, and silence. The world teaches you to keep moving, to keep seeking, to stay connected at all times. But nature teaches the opposite, that stillness is necessary for strength, that solitude is essential for depth. Solitude is not isolation, it is connection of a different kind. It is connection with your essence, with the source of your energy, with the rhythm of your own life. When you are constantly surrounded by others, your energy becomes entangled with theirs. You begin to absorb their moods, their desires, their fears. Slowly, you lose the ability to hear your own inner voice. Solitude is the act of returning to that voice, of listening to what it has been trying to tell you all along. When you give yourself the gift of being alone, you rediscover clarity. You begin to see which desires are truly yours and which were inherited from the world around you. In solitude, healing begins. The pain that was suppressed by busyness surfaces. The emotions you have avoided finally find space to breathe. This process can feel heavy, even painful, but it is necessary. Growth is not about escaping discomfort. It is about meeting it with awareness. Solitude gives you the courage to do this. When there is no one to distract you, you are left with what is real. You begin to face the patterns that keep repeating in your life, the beliefs that keep you limited, the fears that keep you small. Awareness begins to dissolve them one by one. Healing becomes transformation, and transformation becomes freedom. Every person who seeks depth must learn to walk through the corridor of solitude. It is the passage from external dependency to internal mastery. You cannot understand your purpose while constantly listening to the noise of others. You cannot hear the call of your spirit while being drowned in conversation, opinion, and distraction. Solitude strips away the unnecessary so that what is essential can emerge. It is not a punishment, it is a purification. The mind becomes lighter, the heart clearer, and the spirit freer. Growth also requires solitude because creativity is born in silence. Every great idea, every breakthrough, every moment of realization comes from a space where the mind is unoccupied. When the noise of the world pauses, inspiration has room to enter. In solitude, imagination expands. You begin to see new possibilities, new directions, new expressions of yourself. The painter finds vision in stillness. The poet finds rhythm in silence. The thinker finds clarity in isolation. Solitude nurtures the seed of creativity until it is ready to blossom into form. In the absence of solitude, people often confuse movement with progress. They stay busy, constantly occupied, believing that motion equals growth. But without reflection, without stillness, without silence, movement can become repetition. You keep circling the same lessons without realizing it. Solitude breaks this cycle. It allows you to step back and see the pattern from above. It reveals the meaning behind your experiences and helps you move from unconscious reaction to conscious direction. Growth requires awareness, and awareness is born in silence. To grow in solitude is to develop self-reliance. When you spend time alone, you learn to depend on your own presence for peace. You stop seeking constant validation and begin to cultivate inner stability. You discover that your worth is not tied to others' recognition but to your own integrity. You learn to enjoy your company, to find comfort in your thoughts, to find stillness in your breath. Solitude becomes your teacher, guiding you toward independence, not through isolation but through inner wholeness. The greatest transformations happen when no one is watching. The seed does not bloom in the sunlight. It transforms in darkness, hidden beneath the soil. The caterpillar does not become the butterfly in the open. It changes in the silence of the cocoon. Human transformation follows the same law. Solitude is your cocoon. It is the sacred space where your old self dissolves and your new self begins to form. The process cannot be rushed. It requires patience, trust, and surrender. In solitude, you learn to let go of control and allow growth to happen naturally. Many run from solitude because they equate it with loneliness, but loneliness is the absence of connection, while solitude is the presence of self. Loneliness makes you feel empty. Solitude fills you with awareness. When you embrace solitude, you no longer feel alone because you begin to sense the quiet companionship of life itself, the breeze that moves, the light that shifts, the breath that flows. You realize that existence is never separate from you, it moves through you. Solitude opens the door to that realization. Growth is not just the accumulation of knowledge, it is the deepening of consciousness. It is not about becoming more, it is about becoming real. Solitude teaches you how to listen, not to others, but to life. In that listening, understanding arises. You begin to see that every answer you seek, every clarity you desire, already exists within you, waiting in silence for you to return. Solitude is not a detour on the path of growth. It is the path itself. It is where you find the strength to begin again, the wisdom to understand yourself, and the courage to walk forward in alignment with who you truly are. Discipline is often misunderstood. Many associate it with restriction, control, and limitation, as if it takes away joy or spontaneity. But in truth, discipline is the path toward liberation. It is not a prison, it is the key that unlocks true freedom. Without discipline, the mind becomes a slave to its impulses. It reacts rather than chooses, follows rather than leads. With discipline, the mind becomes a master. It learns how to act with awareness, how to move with purpose, and how to stay aligned with truth even when temptation whispers otherwise. Discipline is the bridge between who you are and who you have the potential to become. When a river flows without direction, it floods and destroys. But when its flow is guided by the riverbanks, it nourishes everything it touches. The same is true of human energy. Without discipline, energy is wasted, scattered across distractions, desires, and doubts. But with discipline, that same energy becomes focused, powerful, and creative. Discipline gives form to freedom. It gives structure to chaos. It transforms potential into reality. Freedom without discipline becomes indulgence, and indulgence soon becomes suffering. True freedom is not the absence of boundaries. It is the mastery of self within them. Discipline begins with small choices. Waking up when the mind wants to stay asleep. Speaking truth when it would be easier to remain silent. Continuing the practice when enthusiasm fades. These moments, repeated daily, shape the inner character. Each act of discipline builds strength not only in the body, but also in the spirit. It teaches you to rely on yourself, to trust your commitment, to honor your word. The power that comes from discipline is quiet but unshakable. It is not the power of dominance. It is the power of control over one's own energy, thoughts, and actions. In a world of constant distraction, discipline becomes sacred. The modern mind is pulled in 1,000 directions, constantly stimulated yet rarely satisfied. The ability to focus, to stay with one task, one purpose, one breath, is now a rare art. Discipline protects attention. It allows you to direct your awareness consciously rather than scatter it carelessly. Every time you practice discipline, you are training your mind to return to the present moment. You are teaching it to stay where your body is, to align thought, intention, and action. Through this alignment, inner freedom arises naturally. Discipline is not harshness. It is love in its highest form. It is the love that says, I care enough about myself to stay consistent. It is the love that chooses long-term peace over short-term pleasure. It is the love that does not seek comfort but seeks clarity. A disciplined mind is not rigid, it is resilient. It bends without breaking, adapts without losing direction. It understands that true growth happens not in moments of excitement, but in moments of repetition. The warrior does not train only when he feels inspired. He trains because he has made a vow to himself. That vow becomes his strength, and that strength becomes his freedom. Without discipline, emotions rule the mind. Anger dictates reaction, desire clouds judgment, and fear limits movement. Discipline brings awareness to these emotions. It does not suppress them, it observes them. Through consistent practice, whether in meditation, physical training, or daily work, the mind learns to respond instead of react. This is where freedom begins. You no longer become a servant to your moods. You act not because you are compelled by emotion, but because you have chosen consciously. Discipline creates a space between impulse and action, and in that space lies wisdom. In solitude, discipline becomes even more important. When no one is watching, when there is no applause or encouragement, discipline becomes the teacher. It keeps you aligned with your purpose even in silence. It reminds you that the greatest victories are not seen by others, they are felt within. The one who remains consistent when the world is asleep builds a kind of freedom that cannot be taken away. This is why discipline is not about rules, it is about relationship. A relationship with your own potential, your own truth, your own path. Every practice, no matter how small, strengthens inner freedom. The discipline of meditation teaches the mind to stay still amidst chaos. The discipline of physical training teaches endurance. The discipline of honesty teaches courage. Each form of discipline refines a different part of the being, shaping it into harmony. Over time, this harmony becomes freedom, not the kind that escapes responsibility, but the kind that embraces it fully. Freedom that is grounded, stable, and unshaken by circumstance. The mind without discipline is like a wild horse. It runs in every direction, exhausting itself without ever reaching the destination. Discipline does not kill the spirit of the horse, it trains it to move with grace and precision. The disciplined mind is the same. It knows when to act and when to be still, when to speak and when to remain silent. It channels its energy toward creation rather than chaos. Through this channeling, life begins to flow smoothly, effortlessly. Discipline becomes the rhythm through which freedom dances. Those who misunderstand discipline often see it as a burden. But discipline, once practiced, transforms into joy. There is a quiet satisfaction that comes from keeping your word to yourself, from doing what you said you would do. It builds self-respect, and self-respect builds inner peace. When you know you can trust yourself, the world outside loses its power to control you. This is the essence of inner freedom. To be unmoved by external fluctuations because your foundation is stable within. Discipline builds that foundation, one choice at a time. The paradox of discipline is that the more you practice it, the freer you become. When you discipline your time, you gain time. When you discipline your thoughts, you gain clarity. When you discipline your body, you gain vitality. What seems restrictive at first reveals itself as liberation. The undisciplined life feels free but quickly becomes enslaved to habits, to distractions, to desires. The disciplined life feels demanding at first but soon opens into boundless space. This is the great lesson of every spiritual and physical tradition. Through structure comes expansion. Through order comes peace. Through discipline comes freedom. Discipline is the silent architect of inner harmony. It shapes character, aligns energy, and builds the strength needed to walk the path of awareness. Without it, even the greatest potential remains dormant. With it, even the simplest life becomes profound. Discipline is not about perfection. It is about persistence. It is about showing up again and again, even when the mind resists, even when progress feels invisible. Over time, this persistence refines the spirit. It creates a quiet strength that no circumstance can break. And in that strength lies the truest form of freedom, the freedom to be still, to be clear, to be fully alive within every moment. Everything begins from within. Before anything manifests in the world, it first takes form in the unseen field of the self. Every idea, every creation, every transformation originates from the silent center of your being. The self is the seed of all possibility, because within it lies the blueprint of every potential that could ever unfold. Just as a single seed contains the promise of an entire forest, the self contains the potential for wisdom, strength, peace, and creation beyond measure. But most people search outside for what can only be cultivated inside. They look for meaning, validation, and direction in the world, forgetting that the source of all things they seek already exists quietly within their own consciousness. The seed does not need to be told how to grow. It already carries the intelligence of life within it. It only requires the right conditions, light, warmth, patience, and nourishment. In the same way, the self does not need to be taught its potential. It only needs to be remembered. The conditions that allow the self to flourish are awareness, silence, discipline, and presence. When the self is nourished with these qualities, it begins to unfold naturally, revealing wisdom and capacity that were always there, hidden beneath layers of distraction, fear, and doubt. The world often teaches you to look outward, to chase success, approval, and recognition. But this constant pursuit distances you from the source of true power. When your attention is scattered across external desires, you lose touch with your own center. You begin to believe that your worth depends on what you achieve, what you own, or how others see you. Yet everything external is impermanent, and so a life built on outer validation is always fragile. The self, however, is unchanging. It is the silent observer behind every experience, the ground of being that remains untouched by success or failure. To reconnect with it is to return to stability. It is to find the foundation upon which real growth can be built. When you begin to turn inward, you discover that the self is not limited by identity or form. It is vast, infinite, and interconnected with everything that exists. From this realization comes a quiet confidence, a knowing that you are not separate from life, but a living expression of it. The same energy that moves the stars, grows the trees, and flows through the oceans also flows through you. When you align with this energy, when you trust its rhythm, life ceases to feel like struggle and begins to unfold with ease. The self is the bridge between the unseen and the seen, the invisible root from which all manifestation grows. In the absence of self-awareness, life becomes mechanical. You act without understanding why, react without awareness, and move through cycles of repetition. But when you awaken to the self, awareness dawns. You begin to see patterns that once controlled you. You begin to question not just what you are doing, but who you are becoming. This awareness is the first movement of possibility. When you see yourself clearly, you realize that you are not bound by your past. You are not confined by the labels you have accepted or the roles you have played. You are the consciousness that can choose differently, the presence that can begin again in every moment. The self is like fertile soil. Whatever seed you plant within it will grow. If you plant thoughts of fear, resentment, or limitation, those will take root and shape your reality. If you plant thoughts of gratitude, love, and courage, they will bear fruits of harmony and abundance. The outer world mirrors the inner one. The more you cultivate awareness and stillness within, the more your external life aligns with clarity and peace. The secret is not to fight the outer world, but to nurture the inner one. When the self is balanced, everything around it naturally begins to fall into place. To recognize that the self is the seed of all possibility is to understand that power does not come from control but from alignment. You cannot force a seed to grow by pulling at it. You must trust its timing and care for the conditions that support its unfolding. The same is true for human potential. Growth cannot be rushed. The self matures through patience, consistency, and quiet reflection. The more you rush to become something, the further you move from what you already are. The greatest transformations happen not when you chase them, but when you return to stillness and allow them to arise from within. In solitude and silence, the seed of the self begins to awaken. When the noise of the world quiets, you start to hear the deeper rhythm of existence pulsing through you. Insight comes not as thought, but as realization. You begin to sense that everything you have ever needed has been present within you since the beginning. The guidance you seek, the courage you wish for, the peace you long for, all of it lives inside the self. The journey is not about becoming more, it is about uncovering what has always been there. The process of awakening the self is not without challenge. The soil of the mind must be cleared of weeds, old beliefs, emotional attachments, and self-doubt. Just as a gardener must remove what blocks growth, you too must observe and release what no longer serves your evolution. This is not a process of rejection, but of purification. Every fear you face, every pain you heal, every illusion you dissolve clears the space for the self to expand. Growth through the self is not dramatic, it is subtle, steady, and deeply transformative. When the self is awakened, freedom arises. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to move through it with awareness. You begin to act consciously rather than react unconsciously. You no longer need to prove your worth because you understand it is inherent. You no longer chase validation because you recognize your completeness. From this place, creation becomes effortless. The self, when aligned with awareness, becomes a channel for infinite possibility. Ideas flow, intuition sharpens, and your actions begin to carry a quiet power that influences everything around you. Everything external that you admire, the beauty, the strength, the wisdom, the creativity, is only a reflection of what already exists within you. The self mirrors the universe, and the universe mirrors the self. When you understand this unity, comparison dissolves. There is no longer a need to compete or imitate, because you recognize that your expression of life is unique, and within that uniqueness lies infinite potential. The self, like a seed, contains the full pattern of its destiny. All it needs is attention, patience, and trust in the unfolding. To live from the awareness of the self is to live in alignment with the rhythm of existence. It is to understand that every challenge is a teacher, every silence is a lesson, and every experience is an opportunity to return home to yourself. The self is both the beginning and the source, both the seed and the tree, both the question and the answer. Everything that will ever be possible for you begins in the quiet realization of who you truly are